I'm here principally to help you understand the new requirements of EHL within the National Feedlot Accreditation Scheme. But as Grant said, basically, I suppose I want to point out some background to the NFAS. It is the feedlot industry's own self-regulatory quality assurance program, and certainly participants are able, through the implementation of a quality management system and annual audits at the feedlot, demonstrate they're meeting the requirements of their customers, regulators, markets, and also the community in a number of areas, the key ones being animal welfare, environmental management, product integrity, and food safety. Just as a bit of background, the scheme commenced in 1994. The stats we've been through, the program is administered by AusMeet, but it's actually managed by a committee, an industry committee called FLIAC, the Feedlot Industry Accreditation Committee. Its membership is made up of alpha representatives, state representatives, and the CEO of AusMeet Limited. And certainly it's only accredited feedlots that can represent cattle as complying to grain-fed requirements of the AusMeet language, GFYG. I just wanted to provide you some quick stats on the program. You can see over the last 4 to 5 years the program's been very successful. There's been a lot of growth in the number of participants and also the capacity, the one-time standing capacity of the program. And part of the reason of that success in the program is its ability to adopt new industry requirements when they come necessary to. And indeed, EHL is one of the new industry requirements that's being introduced into the NFAS. Indeed, some of the industry stakeholders, I suppose, have highlighted to the industry the concerns they have in EHL, principally being regulators and the community, with concerns in excessive heat load. And in MLA, and you'll hear some discussions, there's obviously commissioned, which is Alpha has commissioned MLA to do some research into excessive heat load and have developed a number of industry tools to help the industry manage the risk presented by excessive heat load. And Alpha has also requested that the requirements for managing EHL be included in the NFAS scheme. To follow that up, the committee that runs the scheme, FLIAC, introduced the requirements as guidelines as of the 1st of January this year. And the reason they introduced them as guidelines was to, one, in recognition that they were new industry tools that were becoming available, also that people needed some time to provide some training by industry on how to use those new industry tools, and also so they could obtain some feedback on the implementation of the new requirements. So how do participants go in incorporating the new requirements in their systems at feedlots, and to get some feedback from industry stakeholders. I can tell you that FLIAC actually met yesterday to review the feedback that was obtained from the industry stakeholders and from participants. There was a survey conducted in line with the annual audits to obtain information back from participants on the implementation of the new requirements. They considered that yesterday and have agreed now to introduce the EHL requirements as part of the standard. That requirement will be implemented as of the 1st of December this year, so before this summer season. And I suppose just to advise you, as a new requirement, obviously NFAS auditors will be reviewing the implementation of that requirement at the next annual audit. So what does the NFAS EHL standard require? Basically 3 things. It requires participants to conduct a risk assessment, to implement management practices that they've identified as necessary in managing the EHL risk, and to introduce contingency planning through the implementation of an excessive heat load action plan. So in meeting the NFAS requirements for EHL, for the first step, the risk assessment, they must conduct and document their risk assessment and maintain records of it. Obviously, being a QA program, the main requirement is you document what you do and you keep records to prove that you did it. So conduct the risk assessment, keep records that you've done it. The risk assessment must include site climatic factors, so your location, animal factors such as genotype, coat colour, days on feed, and management factors such as the temperature of water, the shade, manure management practices. The risk assessment must include all your categories of livestock that you've got on the feedlot, and obviously the most important is your worst case scenario, but by looking at all the categories you're obviously going to identify your worst case scenario. And the risk assessment must be reviewed annually. That can be in line with your internal audit program or management review, and ideally that would be for the summer season. All right, the risk assessment, if necessary, will indicate what management practices you need to implement, and you'll be choosing them yourself. But once you've identified the management practices that you need to implement, you need to document them within your quality management system or your QA manual procedures. Examples of the management practices are such things as not having certain types of cattle in the summer months, or indeed monitoring weather, animal behaviour, and monitoring the accumulated heat load units on an ongoing basis. Or maybe the requirement to introduce a minimum level of shade, or you might already have it in. In regards to contingency planning, the feedlot's required to implement an excessive heat load action plan, and this plan must document the responsible person at the feedlot, and then obviously contact details for your veterinarian, your nutritionist, the responsible people, so if you delegated responsibilities, who they are, a threshold for activation, so in other words, when are you predicting there's going to be an EHL event? Is it through panting scores in the morning, or is it through monitoring excessive heat load units? But you need a trigger to say when you're going to implement the contingency plan. And obviously then the operational activities that you're going to implement. So the introduction of extra water troughs or increases in pen management or other operational things that you're doing to address the event that you're potentially having. So from the NFAS's point of view, I think it's pretty simple that the three things you need to do is conduct a risk assessment, identify any management practices that you need to implement to address any identified risks in that risk assessment, and also introduce an excessive heat load action plan to introduce in the event of a potential event occurring. So they're three simple things, and they all need to be documented and records maintained so that when the auditor comes, you can demonstrate that you've complied to the standard. So that's retaining records of your risk assessment and providing copies of your procedures with what you're doing to reduce the risk of an excessive heat load event, and providing a copy of your excessive heat load action plan to say what you're going to do if you do have an event. So I won't go into more details about the actual risk assessment because following speakers will go into a bit of detail about that, and certainly there'll be opportunity for more questions if you have them, I think, at the end of the presentation. So I'd just like to say thank you very much for listening to me. If you just implementation-wise, we notify NFAS participants of the introduction of a new standard through an NFAS advice. That NFAS advice will go out next week, so feedlot should receive that advice by the end of next week. It'll have the requirements for implementation into your quality management system. If you have any questions when you do get that advice, by all means give me a call. My phone number will be on it, and I'll try and help you out. Thank you.